I guess there's not many things that I have a generic interest in more than Reno air racers. Just absolutely love to look at all of them. Don't have to be P-51s, Bearcats, Yaks, Sea Furies. It's a very interesting part of aviation history in my mind anyway. And of course one of my favorites was and always will be the late John Sandberg's Tsunami. Even if you're just looking for a paint job or a name for your next plane, it's a rich source of information and inspiration, any of the Reno Air Race magazines. Anybody doesn't know, this is the ship, the Sea Fury of Levallois, sponsored by Levallois. Blind Man's Bluff, Levallois Blinds. Is that cool? Yeah, the magazines are just loaded with Reno type stuff. Now look at this picture. Is that ever close racing or what? Number 7, Strega. Anyway, I find these magazines to be just a great source of information, especially if you have some remote interest in Reno air racers. And usually I find these at garage sales and stuff around here for about $1 a piece. But there's several of them. I think this is one of the better ones. And there's a lot of good ones. Warbirds, Reno air racers. Got some cutaway drawings that are excellent. And if you like warbirds, if you like any of these planes, these magazines are just great. Nice spinner. Here's an idea for Banjock, a polka dot spinner. It's just unfortunate that there aren't a whole slew of P-47 Reno air racers to pick paint jobs from. Alright, time to get down to shop. Enough of this magazine reading and coffee drinking. Time to get some work done. Now, over the years, one of the biggest, well, when I look back over the hobby, one of the biggest problems we always have at the Circle Burner field, people want wing-mounted gear, especially in built-up wings, and about 10 landings into the season, the gear are either loose or broken out. And over the years, I've developed a system that I've published in Pampa and that I've written about and videotaped. I'm going to go through it real quick for any of the new subscribers, especially the foreign ones. May not have seen this. Now, as you may remember, on old Tsunami, when Tsunami crashed for the second time, I wanted to see just how good the gear mount was. I went and took the wire and grabbed it and bent it back and forth about 200 times until it actually fatigued. And that's how good the gear mounting system that I've been using, at least has worked for me. It's an easy system to replicate. I want to do a little storyboard on it first, but it's worked good for virtually everybody I know that's ever used it, and it might be worth incorporating into whatever design you're building. Now, when we used to fly in Flushing all the time on smooth tar with no bumps, gear never came loose. But you fly at the circle burner field long enough, or over grass or bumps, eventually you're going to lose a landing gear. And it's very frustrating. Especially when we have new people that have never flown at the club field and they go to land, there's about a segment between 12 o'clock and 1 o'clock on a circle where it's smooth, and the rest of it is kind of rough, and you can lose. You can even use fuse gear. I've seen guys losing. But anyway, let me go through the system that's worked well for me. I remember back a tape or two ago, what we did is we changed the landing gear location. I moved it outward by a couple of ribs. I wanted that real wide gear track. Now that, in essence, makes it even worse. It looks cool, well, looks scale. But the price you pay is the further out in the wing you put the gear, the stronger it has to be. Years ago, well, SIG still supplies these blocks, but people used to use these landing gear blocks, and there's nothing wrong with these blocks. It's only an engineering problem that you have to resolve. And what you would do is on the end of this, you would basically clip one end off. This was the technology of years and years ago. And you would mount that on the edge, so that in effect, you'd have this. Boy, I should go for art lessons, huh? Computer lessons and art lessons. Anyway, you would wind up with, from the side view, the block would basically look like this. And the engineering problem that's involved, this would be the notch. And then you would have to drill a hole down through here to retain the wire. Now the problem with this the whole deal is, this is what your wire would look like, is this arm, if you can picture what this would look like, this is where the wheel would mount. Well, maybe I ought to put it on camera. What would happen is, this moment arm, remember it's just like a tail moment, this moment arm, A, relative to B, was 5, 6, 8, 10 times longer. Now, there's two sets of forces that you deal with in a landing gear, whether it's a real plane, a model, doesn't matter. These forces always apply. As this might seem, a lot of people, there's people that still don't understand it, and they still, even on our club, they overlook what happens. Usually what will happen on a grass field, on tar you can get away with almost anything, especially if you look back at the old Magnum kit. I'll bet every third Magnum kit that ever went to the circle burner field came home with retracts. Well, because they didn't have this part of it engineered well. And Mikey, I apologize, but it wasn't engineered well, trust me. What would happen is, you on grass you get a force that basically hits right here. So now think of what the moment arm is here. Think of the leverage you have. You have the equivalent of a pipe wrench here, and this little stubby guy here as the opposition. Well, it's going to rotate around this point, but you have so much leverage, you're going to break it almost every time. And what usually happens is this block tends to go this way. It tears away from the balsa wood here, crushes the balsa wood or plywood here. Even when you put those little, in the olden days they used to put those plywood, light ply things in there. Well, they held some of the time, but not all the time. But anyway, over the years, boy, I just got sick of seeing this. And there's contests I went to where I had to fix 4 or 5 sets of gear in one contest for people. And then you wind up pouring epoxy in here and fiberglass, and it's a ton. If you do it right the first time, you'll never have this problem again. And the whole trick is 2 things. The torsion arm, the moment arm, for this, make as long as possible. Now, in the case of if you have a thin wing plane, like a Magnum, or one of Billy Werwige's designs where the airfoil's relatively thin, you're limited. But obviously, it's this moment arm here, that when you can increase this moment arm, also, if you make a set of gear that look like this, and I make a set of gear with a very short torsion arm, this torsion arm, I've found that if it's less than 2 inches, about 2 inches seems right for a 60 size ship. When I've made it 1 inch, the gear are too stiff and they tend to get, I don't know, I get nervous about them. I've tried making it 3 inches. On some of the Spitfires we've used 3-inch wide landing gear legs. What happens? the landing gear too rubbery and spongy. So all of these things have been kind of worked out for you, or hopefully, that if you're doing it, it doesn't matter if it's a Magnum or a whatever. These are the critical things. Getting this arm, which is on this piece of the wire, I would say these are the critical things. And getting none of these bends to be so sharp. Now we don't even have a wire bender here, so we're kind of in big trouble. If you make these bends razor sharp, the wire tends to fracture. You want to have that kind of a little bit of a radius, a little bit, and the most of all is have this length as long as possible. And the other point of this is we want to have two settings for gear. We want to have our what I'll call concrete setting, and then we want to be going forward about 15 degrees to fly over grass. The reason is, with the gear far back, the plane tends to nose over in grass, and you chew up the cowling or just get the plane dirty. So I always want to have one of two things: two sets of landing gear, which in this case we might just bend two sets of wire and make the doors. Or the other thing is, when you're bending this back and forth, we're going to fly in grass, fly in tar, for a contest or for the gnats or whatever, that torsion arm is taking a lot of abuse. So having this arm long, having the wire bends correct, and having the structure that actually touches the block be reinforced. In our case, we tripled up the balsa, and we'll put some more reinforcements in there. But you have the two things that happen on these gear mounts. And let me just, where the plate is, you have a shock going up. And that plate is strictly taking a shock. When the plane hits the ground, it's taking a punch. It's taking the torsional rotation at the other end of this. So we're going to actually use two blocks. This one is taking the torsional rotation. Keep in mind what those two forces are, and the length of the torsion arm, and I feel 2 inches is about right for my use anyway. This being about 2 inches gives just enough spring to the gear without making it a rubber band. Commercial blocks that they sell, and there's nothing wrong with these. These will work for you. But you can rest assured, if you mount this little piece up on edge here, and that arm is short, you're going to have some kind of failure sooner or later. Even if you use these blocks and you don't make your own the way I do, one of the things you can do is cut this little piece off and put that further up into the wing. So let's pretend it's a Magnum kit even. Especially on a foam wing, get that as far away from the block so you have leverage here to contain that rotation. What this is looking to do inside the wing is do that. There's no force up and down. All the force is back and forth on that upper block. So having said that, let me go get some wood. Let's start cutting up our gear blocks for this plane. Start with ordinary light ply. This is a scrap piece. Notice on light ply the grain is going one direction, is going the other way, but I want to go in the direction. I want to lay the block out this way. So the grain is going front to back, because the only force that's going to happen here is the punch force, and it's going to want to spread the wire. So I'd like to have the grain going in that direction if possible. Okay, so I've set it up with the grain going in this dimension. Now I need to measure the distance between the ribs that are going to contain this. So I'll go over to the wing and get an exact measurement. I don't want these hanging out past the ribs. And just let me double check. Obviously these are the same. So now I have the length that I need, and I'm going to make both up at the same time. I can make two at the same time as making one. Whenever I've tried to make this any thinner than this, what happens is, and it's a real problem, you don't have enough meat left over to put the screws and the blind nuts in to hold the little hatches in place. So I have a set width, and I don't even know what it is, but I'll tell you how secret this is. This feels like we're making a B-2 bomber here. I always use the thickness of the black ruler, and it works pretty well. For everybody's reference, it's 3/4 of an inch. Funny how little things like that evolve. Anyway, so these blocks are 3/4 by a little bit bigger than 2, just so they go to the end of the triplers that I have on those ribs. Way to make up the mating parts for this is I laid a wire that actually will be the width of the wire out. right on the part itself. Just get it roughly taped in position. All this does is hold it in position. And now I want to put some end grain in here. In the end grain balsa, I'm going to get the hardest piece of 1/8 inch balsa I have and end grain it. Now the trick here is to get the best use of the grain of the wood. You want to use the end grain here. If you put the grain going this way, defeat it, just like doing the motor mount crutch, you've defeated the whole purpose of it. But actually, by using a wire, and I'll harden this with thin CA before I cut this all apart, this is a real nice, convenient way to lay up your own blocks, and they're about 1/3 the weight. I'll just repeat the same on this side, then when I take the wire out, I'll have a perfect trough. Now you have the perfect notch, and you've got enough, even if you screw up one of the blocks, you have enough left over to make an extra one. Okay, next step, I'll go over to the jigsaw and just cut out the whole blank as one piece. On this strip, I took 2 pieces of 64th plywood, and I'm going to get some thin CA, lay this on a flat surface. What the purpose of this is, I've sanded this surface down just a little bit, about a 1/64 of an inch with a sanding block. Purpose of this is so when I put the hatches on, it's compressing against plywood instead of balsa wood. If you leave that step out, sometimes the hatches tend to sink down into the wing in time. The thing that makes this work is the grain of the wood. The grain on the plywood going this way, grain of the balsa going this way, and our covers going lengthwise. So what we have is a sandwich that's really rigid, and this is, I would guess, 1/3 to 1/2 the weight of what a normal gear block system would be, and much stronger. And it won't break. I'm going to clean up the notch, and I want to harden that whole area inside with thin CA. Again, a lot of people not really familiar with putting the blocks in properly or in a way that makes sense. Hey, this gives you a lot of flexibility, especially on a plane where you want the gear to be in a certain position. You can't resort to fuse mounted gear or whatever. Gives you a lot of choices. Now, real important to harden this area up with thin CA. It laminates the block also. And I hope someday I have a secretary that can answer the phone while I'm shooting video. Let me get the phone. I also put a good soaking of thin CA on all of the end grain. Serves 2 purposes. Some of it's capillary, of course. It runs down into the wood joint, and it hardens the wood joint. And that's one of the quality, especially end grain on light ply. I always want to seal that edge with thin CA. So all of those edges are sealed. I'm just going to let this kick off normally. No kicker, just let it kick. And then we'll sand that groove down, take these over to the belt sander and finish them off. So there's the final product we have. Again, we've used up what amounts to be almost no real time. A little half-hour session. We have another part made. I always want to clean that out, but I want to keep a tight fit. I want that to be almost a snap fit in there. See, it's just a little tight up at this end. Clean it out with a nail file. Anyway, we're going to pick this up tomorrow. I hear the oven upstairs kicking out a brisket, and believe me, the brisket is calling. But anyway, again, as I've said on a previous video, I really, because of the business reorganization, have not had a lot of big giant gaps of time, but we certainly have these little half-hour and hour sessions, and I love to just get little parts like this made up. Nice tight fit in there. We'll pick this up tomorrow. Morning, what I did, again, I'm trying to get 2 little sessions in here. I cut the 2 blocks to the length I need, and I have a piece of overage here, which I'm going to maybe have the option of using. I also, off camera, I took scraps, and this is all scraps of 64th plywood, and laminated 4 of them together with the grains going in all diagonal different directions. So this is going to be my little plates on which get attached a little balsa block like a door, like a cowling anyway. So I've got those pieces. Now, in the past, one of the tricks I've learned is to always take this piece and take the block and drill all the holes at the same time. Don't trim this piece until you actually have this piece ready. So what I'm going to do is go over to the drill press. I also found years ago I used to use 3 screws. That was unnecessary. The last 2 or 3 planes have only had 2 screws. Joe out of Musco uses 2. 2 screws is fine. You can use aluminum screws if you really want to cut the weight down. We have that choice of using aluminum, but with this little block, I'm going to hold this gear door right in place and drill a whole assembly at once. First I have to transpose those holes where I want them on this block. Then what I'll do is use the first block as a pattern to drill a second block. Got the holes transposed, so now I can take that and drill that all as one piece. Now, in the worst of all worlds, if you weren't happy with this movement, put 1 drop of CA on each end. In my case, I can just spot drill this without gluing it together. And then when I'm all done, I can go to a belt sander and sand these so they're a perfect match with the holes in. Now, the one thing you would never want to do, just keep in mind, I've done this so many times that the wrong way, is you drill these holes, and then you drill these holes, and then you try to line up the door. Nah, put the holes in first, and then grind the edge. It'll be a perfect match, just like making a crutch. This will hold this piece in place, and that's kind of standard machine shop technology you can use right on your next model. Seems to pick up the shape. Trick, just to mention it, if you were looking for and in this case we don't need this amount of precision, but if you were doing, say, something that you really needed absolute precision on, one of the ways they would do it in a normal machine shop environment is to drill this hole and peg it or pin it or bolt it, and then drill this hole. In our case, I think just holding it together will be accurate enough since we have plenty of material to work with. But if you were drilling some irreplaceable part, that would be a good way to do it. Another idea here. See, I love how I can improvise these things. Let's see if I got one over here. Only to show that this is one of the ways you can do it. Now this locks this piece in place so that the other hole is in an accurate position. Now, for anybody that doesn't know, and this is just for information's sake, now you can bet your life these are in real good, accurate alignment. One of the things, I never worked in a machine shop at all until I was 44 years old. But when I got to work in it, I was totally intrigued by how many things are standard, or I just call a machine shop procedure. And I'd never figure out, like, an example is when you make a cowling. I'd make a cowling, put it on, put a bolt, put a thing, drill. Never could get the alignment right. I'd look at Stan Powell's cowling and go, how does he do that? It would make me crazy. Well, when I started working in a machine shop, what I found is there's always a technique or a set of things. One part lines up another part, which lines up, which gives you a surface, which yada, 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 yada. But what happens is when you're done, you learn how to think about things and what
when you look at it at a given problem, you come up with a standard solution. There's always get this hole drilled, pin that hole, hold that, that'll hold this door. And when we put these doors in the final fit, the doors will fit, the bolts will line up, it'll just drop right in. And you can imagine if you didn't have some of this basic technology, you could just go crazy all day making one little door and then it would be crooked anyway. So a lot of this stuff, even though I may go on and on and on, a lot of people say, oh, the videos are too long. Then half of the people say, oh, the videos don't show you enough. Yeah, but they give you some idea of how to approach a given technical problem. And that's what I think is the major benefit of the videos. Just a simple thing like this of getting these holes lined up and getting these edges all trued up. To me, that's something years ago I always had trouble. I always did it some backward way that took 4 times the amount of time to do. So I hope passing some of this information on is helping other people enjoy the world of modeling. I hope. Little tip before putting the blind nuts in, of course, put a couple of drops of WD-40 or just plain oil on, especially if they're aluminum bolts, which we're going to use. The reason being that when you go to CA the blind nuts in, you don't glue the blind nuts to the bolts and have all that action happen. Just 1 drop of CA. Take care of that, it'll never seal up on you. The value of another thing of having this set of drills that's relative to what I had before, relatively precision set of drills. One of the things I used to do before is I'd make the hole for the blind nut with the next bigger, you know, an 1/8 inch bigger drill or something, and it would never seat just the way I wanted it to. So now what I do is I mic up that set of blind nuts, go to the precision set of drills, get exactly the set of drills you need out. And if you don't have a set of these precision drills, I hemmed and hawed about buying these drills for so long, and embarrassingly enough, Midgley finally just bought them for me. Maybe Midgley will buy you a set too. Anyway, what I want to do is get the blind nuts sunken in here. Have a little bit of WD-40 on the bolts. Again, it should be a press fit, but not a fit that's so tight. You know, I can just press these in and they stay. If it's too tight, what happens? It splits the wood and it defeats the whole purpose of it. And before I put any glue, I want to take the little door. Make sure I'm getting this on right. It sounds like these are a lot of little, you know, a lot of times people are down in the shop here and they say, oh yeah, you spend half a day doing something. And then what happens is we get out to the field and you want to bend the gear wires and the doors come right off, everything is perfect. You say, wow, yeah, that pays. And somebody else, they can't get the cowling off, or they have a cowling that you have to take the head of the motor off to get the cowling off or something. Well, just seems like a lot of these little details, it isn't overkill. Now see, one thing, they're aluminum bolts. I'll shorten the bolts, of course, and I'm going to go over to the grinder and true this. Because the bolts are now holding us in position, these door edges will be perfectly true without a lot of extra work. In fact, it'll be easy, even I can do it. With the bolts, with the parts bolted together. This is the same thing as when you make a cowling first and then make the plane fit the cowling. It's so much easier than trying to make a cowling fit a plane. Numbered so that I can put them back even though they are interchangeable, just make while I'm putting them together until I carve the little balsa hatches, make them easier to identify. Another thing, these are ready to install in the wing, and that's the next step, is to lay out the little notch so that these will fit just below the sheeting, and I'm able then to get these installed exactly the way I want to have them. And I'm going to need to do a little bit of layout over on the wing right now. These are the ribs that have the triplers on them. You notice I left all the extra wood when I hollowed out the other ribs. These are ready now. I want to lay this out, and I want to real carefully cut that notch, and I want these to sit just low enough that I can put a little balsa cap on here. So I have to estimate this, just take a little guesstimate of just where they are. I want it also to be level this way, and I want them to run along parallel to the spar so that it can interlock with the spar if possible. Just a template. You can see these ribs are not hollowed out yet. And I want to mark out exactly how far I want to set that down. I want to leave myself just enough room for a little balsa cover so I can mark this out ahead of time. If anything, put it in a little lower than you think it should be, and then do the last little bit with a a Bud McKnight sanding stick. I can just roughly get a zona saw, just rough these out. Always good to have a little template, and always good to make these cuts just a little bit undersized and take the last little bit out as you drop the block in and out, because you want a real nice tight fit here. And once I just rough it out, I know I need to get the last little bit out. Hey, a good trick is you can take one of these great little tools, just put a bend on it. Lets you get in there and get the final fit. I have found these tools to be worth their weight in gold. John Poppy is the one that turned me on to this, and the pins. Just a wonderful little helpful tool. Now I don't want to get it too sloppy here. And I will, okay, one more swipe. Okay, now I want to make sure I have a perfectly smooth fit along the edge here, because we're going to put reinforcements in there eventually. Okay, with this done, now I need to cut the hole in here so that the landing gear wire will drop back down into the wing. The hole is there, so obviously so the wire can drop down. Now I need to make up the block that goes on the bottom part of the rib. Step one is I laminated up from 3 pieces of light ply, and you can see I did the same trick as the gear block. Left the trough for the wire. Make sure that the wire slides through there, of course, because sometimes you get some little CA buildup. Took the belt sander, put an angle on it. Now I can get my rib and cut an exact shape right from this piece. Okay, now this is our old friend rib 6, and of course we have the pattern, which makes this very convenient. I want to set this in. Now I know, for instance, I need to line this wire up with the slot in the block. I can't have this back and forth. I need to have an accurate set, and I'm working off this reference point right here. So with this in mind, see how brilliant I can do this. This is going to reside right up against that spar, and I'm going to line that hole up with that. So it's going to give me a reference point of just a little bit further back, oops, as it slides off the table. And of course I'm going to put a piece of dummy wire in there to line that up. Now I can turn this around and I can just make a tracing. I can just rough this out now on the saw. It pays to have the rib templates. Now if you were to use these for one of your sets of ribs, now you wouldn't have a template. We can get that piece for the block. We can cut all our reinforcements. So handy to have. I always like to have a set of templates for everything I do. See where that little piece is going to fit, and because we had the template, it's a perfect fit first time around. Drops right in there. Now what we need to do, lay this piece in and be able to look down, because that's where the landing gear wire is going to go. Now because there's a possibility that I won't get those holes lined up, what I do is get a dummy piece of wire and line them up as as the glue is drying, make sure that wire is holding things in alignment. That's a trick worth its weight in gold.
Okay, now this is just a dummy piece of wire. We've got that in there so we can just tack glue that in, make sure that wire drops in and out, and that this block will sit perfectly level. And then we're going to glue this block in next, and then make some reinforcements for the side out of 64th plywood and carbon fiber. This block is only going to take a down shock. This one is going to take a rotational shock. Another trick I do is before I cut all this wood away, I'm going to harden all this sheeting up for about 2 ribs out on each side with thin CA and double glue these joints. I want all of this to be like a rock solid little unit right in there. Okay, now we can pull a wire out and we can take this block out. Okay, this is ready to put in permanently now. What skill level you are. There's always times you want the balsa to be just a little stiffer, stronger. Soaking it with thin CA is one way to accomplish that without adding a whole lot of weight. I want all this to be as solid as possible. You don't want to kick it with kicker. What you want to do is just let the dust from the little Q-tip kick it away. I always want to make sure I didn't get any glue down in that pocket down there. I want that to be plenty solid. Step is to get in here and remove some of this material. We don't need it. It's going along for the ride now. Open this up so we have a nice enough range for the lead outs. The lead outs when they're in full adjustment either way. Now I always like to get the last little bit out with a little sanding stick or a sanding dowel, so I don't go too far. Then I want to vacuum up all the dust in this area and make my little supports. Now I'm going to make the supports out of 64th plywood and carbon fiber for this part. No, it's funny, I just had somebody just the other day, they were down in a shop, and they saw me vacuuming, and he says, "What do you vacuum up for? You're only going to make more dust." Well, I'm not sure I understand the logic of that, but I like to have it clean. I don't like to breathe any more of this in than I really have to. Next step, I want to get some, the first piece is a 64th plywood, and I want to make sure that I get the joint that it's going to touch the wing skin for the whole length. Okay, now I want to cut a little carbon fiber reinforcement to reinforce that even more. Now I can soak this whole, as soon as this kicks off, soak this whole side, thin CA, and just repeat that on the other side. And every once in a while, some of that little cotton will stick. Get a little sanding stick and get rid of it. Just a question of repeating the carbon and the plywood on this side, making sure we have enough clearance for the lead outs. That little piece in front with the grain going up and down, that's to give me a nice footprint. I want to attach the sheeting to that footprint. So now I'm going to extend that same thing on both sides here, because I want to have a clear footprint to attach that sheeting to, so I can just notch out that little box. Okay, this is the little angle I can put in. That's just a little bit to just save some material. Anywhere we can chisel away some weight, we'll get rid of it. And that'll complete the outer perimeter of the box, so we get a good attachment to the sheeting. Alright, that completes one side. Now we just need to finish up the other side. And that's probably all we're going to get to do today. And the last step before I retire here, I ought to retire, is I took the belt sander and made sure I have an equal amount of clearance around all sides, because we're going to probably drop a little shim around there, maybe some 64th plywood, I don't know. But that about finishes out another wonderful day of part-time work on the wing. What I want to do, I want to get these lead outs unraveled. I have this little carbon fiber support that goes in the middle, and then I want to lay out the BELLCRANK support. I'm hoping this is going to be kind of straightforward, but believe me, you never know. And since we're using flexible lead outs for the first time, I always have that anxiety. Well, I have anxiety no matter what kind of lead outs I'm using. Anyway, I want to get this fit in here, see if I can get this fit in today. And then I want to go through my list and make up a priority list of what else I still have to do. I noticed there's still about 9 things on this before I can actually sheet up the wing, cut off this trailing edge. I'm getting busy already thinking about it. I have to get in here conveniently. I want to run some beads of thin CA around here, around all my joints. And this is just insurance. And I'd like to CA President Nixon to his end of the phone. I'm coming! President Nixon never quits, does he? Yeah, I love those President Nixon phone calls. Anyway, because I can get in here conveniently, this is just double up the joints in the center here, especially because we intend to make this a take-apart wing. These joints are going to take plenty of it. Do you believe this? Run a big multinational corporation, you can never get off the phone. I don't believe this. You would think, the way this phone rings around here, especially this time of year, you would think we're running General Motors or something, you know, if only that were the case. Anyway, this little support needs to go in. And then I want to situate and figure out just how much material I need to remove to get that BELLCRANK in conveniently. But getting those joints firmed up is always a good, I find, a good investment. It's one of those little overkill things that you sleep better at night knowing there's 2 coats of glue on it instead of 1. Okay, so we basically have the same situation we had on the top of the wing. I want to keep this perfectly level. And I want to get this a perfectly flat joint because the sheeting is going to join on here. Those John Pathia pins, they just work so well. Now the thin CA will harden up this whole piece of wood. Then I need to blend it in with a sanding block. Make sure I have a perfectly smooth joint. I don't want the sheeting to have a lump or a bubble or something there. Twist the pins as you pull them out. Always a good way to avoid taking a big chunk of wood out. Alright, we're ready to fit that BELLCRANK in place. One is I'll have to make some allowance to let the arrow shaft go back into that position. And what's handy now, if this piece were on the other side, of course it would be a problem, but the arrow shaft can just lay right out there. So in effect we can check the controls, the movement while it's in place. And I guess one advantage of flexible lead outs is I won't need to drill 2 holes. I could drill 2 holes right in the aluminum and run the lead outs out if I wanted to check it that way. But I won't have to do that. First thing I have to do is kind of lay this out, cut that hole for the arrow shaft so that can drop in there. In the past, many times when I'd build a wing, what would happen is I'd have to break out one of the ribs or do something to get the bell crank, and this one just slid right in, and I don't know if I'm just lucky. Certainly not because I'm talented, that's for sure. But anyway, the idea of this, and I want to be real perfectly clear about this, is a lot of times people mount the bell crank right on the center, the pivot point. You really don't want the pivot point right on the center. You want the mean average of the rotation. So what I've done is measured a rotation. It's 13/16, and I want to be, I mean, we're within a few thousandths here, roughly half of 13/16 off center, so that in the middle of the rotation, I'm on center. And I found that to give the least amount of exponential. Now, guys like Noel Drindak that really are engineers, college-educated engineers, and people like myself that are just seat-of-the-pants engineers or wannabe engineers, we've both come to the same conclusion that it's a very significant thing not to mount the pivot on center, but to mount the pivot off center, and that the middle of the push rod throw should be on center at mid-throw. Do is measure accurately now the center, and then go off half of 13/16 and measure that amount off center, and just put a Dremel tool with a sharp point and put a little tiny hole there and line that rod up before I make the supports. Now, speaking of punching a hole in the sheeting, I got to tell you a funny story. I was putting the test wire in the gear blocks before, and I pressed on it and went right through the sheeting. So I know on the top of this, when I flip it over, there's going to be a little tiny hole. Not a big deal to patch it, of course, but glad it didn't happen on camera. Okay, so now I want to line this up so this isn't slanting inward or outward. I want to slant it so when I look through the lead-out guide, it's relatively straight, and make all those little minor adjustments and just tack this in place. And I can remove any material that's still in the way. It looks like it'll be pretty good. Now I need to, what I did is I just laid a straight edge across here and picked up both center lines just a little bit above. Looks like we're right on center. Now see, I have more travel this way, and even though you'd never use this one, I don't think you ever use as much travel. But what I want to do, but I don't have that much this way, so what I'm going to do is move this little support back, grind away a little material here, but before I grind it away, I'll put that support in the back here, so it'll be in line with this, and it'll tend to even out the amount of travel I have. And it looks like I've got this, the center of the throw right on that. That looks just about right. But I've moved this a couple of times already. I want to get half of that travel. Half of that travel. This is the center line I've picked up with a ruler. Half of the travel, so that at mid-travel right there, we're right on center. This little support up, but I want to get a real tight fit on this notch. I don't want to have a sloppy fit that I have to fill with glue when I go to install this. It's a basswood that I cut from a landing gear block, and a landing gear block. Now I just want to triangulate this and get rid of all the wood that's going along for the ride. But the main thing is a nice tight fit on that. Rough this out and get the fit, and then put a little carbon fiber reinforcement on the upper side so it'll be sandwiched in between the sheeting. Okay, this is the last little part. I've got a little piece of carbon fiber on there. And you got the first one, I've got the bottom one installed already. I just need to get the top one installed and get everything nice and level here so we don't have a bump in the sheeting. Okay, I got that carbon fiber part laminated in there nice. Now, the only thing I need to do is cut away some of this material here so I can get a relatively equal belt crank throw. And that, I guess, is all we're going to be able to do tonight. Now, I always look to make sure I have plenty of clearance around the rib. And this looks like we've got this pretty well licked. And from this dimension that we have an equal amount of throw in each dimension. And I'll just have to remove a little more material as necessary, and then I'll put the reinforcement in the back to take its place.
But the main thing is to have that right on center, halfway through the throw. Now this is what I use to lubricate the bell cranks and push rods and everything, and now that that's permanently in there, I spray this on, let it soak overnight, and in the morning it'll be solid wheel bearing grease. This is really good stuff. Good thing to lubricate any control system with. Motorcycle chain lube. And I just put that on, it goes on like water, like a foam. Let it dry overnight and it'll be wheel bearing grease. Perfect lubrication too. Now when you come back in the morning after putting that chain lube on, you'll notice it's turned to wheel bearing grease. And boy, these are really nice and smooth. I had to cut that whole piece of the rib away to get the full deflection. I've got it right on center. But by the time that sits a day or so, that'll really take good care of it. Now, next step, I'm going to lay out, and pretty much a mirror image of the top, so I won't put a lot of this on the tape. Lay out and put the sheeting on one side, lay out, put the sheeting on the other side, finish the center sheeting, and finish the cap strips. Looks like we have 4 big steps left here. We get started on this, get a little bit done this morning. Okay, before I glue any of the sheeting on, first thing is I'm going to check every station, make sure I haven't moved this while I was installing the gear blocks and the bell crank. And as I've gone down this and checked every station, it looks like it's held pretty true. Little gauges worked very well, and I can just move this. I've shown this before. Just snap it into every station and check my center line. You know, it goes pretty fast because we've already done the top piece. We already have the sequence laid out in our mind pretty well. The nice part is at some point in time it really starts to become a wing. It's really starting to, we're coming down a home stretch within the next week or so. Should be able to have most of the steps on this taken care of. Now this is a good time, in fact in our schedule of the day, this is a good time to take a break. Always good to let one side dry. Anytime I try to rush this, I don't know. Just seems totally unproductive. Anyway, I like to let, even though the tight bond glue dries in an hour or so, maybe even a little more, hour and a half is a safe number. I have plenty of other projects to work on, and it's cheap insurance because when I come back I want to check the center line and everything again, make sure I haven't in any way distorted this, constantly babysitting that center line. And tonight I'll come back, I'll work on that other side. It's really starting to shape up now. Alright, tonight I'll get the rest of this sheeting cut up. Got all the pins out of this side, it dried up nice. This is worth waiting when you get to this point. I don't want to rush this. Now what I'll probably do is get this part of the leading edge in, let it sit there for a half a session, a whole session, and then sheet the center. Now one of the steps that I really didn't want to leave out here is I left the sheeting just a little bit oversized, and what I'm doing is basically just taking a sanding block and little by little getting as tight a fit as I possibly can on there. After quite a few little sanding things, I have the little lip on there, of course. And then when I go to put the alphatic in there, I'll fill that with alphatic, pull it down with tape and pins. Forgot to put this little tip on the video. Alphatic resin is water soluble, and to give yourself a little extra time, which is, in fact, the thing is glued shut, a little extra time while I'm laying that sheeting back down, I'm going to make a little puddle of alphatic resin with a couple extra drops of water to brush it on. It gets a little bit better penetration that way. See, I had forgotten to even put that on. Look at this stuff dries up. You think I could afford a new tube of glue sooner or later. Anyway, I'm going to make a little mixture of Tite Bond and a little bit of water so I can get up under those cap strips, especially around the gear blocks and everything. I don't think I put that little tip on the video. And that, by the way, is a good one. This is excellent glue for this one procedure right here. This is just the best stuff. Remember, at one club demo, one of the stunt forums, in fact, Mike Spiedelier put this tape. Mike Spiedelier is one of the top finishers in our club. And he was talking about using alphatic resin to make invisible glue joints, and I remember this. But the trouble is, at my age, I forget. These are these little Teflon tubs that Midgley has provided us with. By the way, now, I just get the consistency where it's just going to drip right off. And it really penetrates a whole lot better for this kind of an operation, and it gives you a little more dry time. You know, what it allows me to do is get way up underneath where I normally, it's a little difficult to get up under there. And get a little bead right up, especially by the gear blocks. In having done a lot of autopsies and pulling gear blocks out of planes after they've failed, I always look around and I see, geez, half of the block isn't coated with glue. Well, that isn't going to make it a lot stronger, that's for sure. See, the glue goes on a whole lot easier when it's thin like this. Now, with all my little inventions and stuff, I wish I could invent something that my memory was better. I learn all this stuff and then I forget it. But I guess we all do that. One thing good about this hobby, you don't have a whole slew of young kids coming in. David Fitzgerald's the only one that has a memory. And he'll get old eventually. Anyway, even one little tip like this, it's such a good one. And because this is going to be a take-apart plane, it may be that we use this wing over and over in several different fuselages. I mean, there's a lot of options when you have a take-apart plane. That's one of the things that's real nice. Is being able to just take, oh, I wish I could take Strega, take the wing and tail out of Strega right now. And throw that oil-soaked fuselage away. Only lasted about 250 gallons of fuel. Should ask for my money back. Anyway, the thin alphatic is really a nice tip. And it does give you a nice amount of time to work in. See, what I try to do is pull the wood toward the end before I even put the tape on. Peg it in with the pins first. That's another good tip. Pull that sheeting. Otherwise, when you look in at the completed model, what you see is that the ribbon is sheeting. There's a big buckle in there. Well, obviously that's not what we want. Okay, now we're going to put that aside to dry. It's really starting to look like a wing. This is the part when it really starts to get exciting to work on it. Now here's where you can really save some time, because we already have this piece already roughed out. How much time do you save now? If you didn't have this pattern, do you see what I mean? Once you make the pattern, it's almost like making a mold. And the next wing we make with this same configuration, having all these patterns, the wing will go in a fraction at a time. Anyway, I want to lay this out and get all the sheeting cut while that's drying. Got this nice big poster-sized picture from Joe in the mail today. Obviously we'll find a spot to put it right up here. I'll tell you, a lot of inspirational stuff. The more stuff you can put on the walls of your shop, I think the better off you are. Now let that wing dry now. Alright, today I finally got all the cap strips in, very similar to the, doing the top. Now, the two little things I'd like to finish tonight, I'd like to radius off this leading edge just a little bit while it's still in the jig and the jig is holding it nice and solid. Do that, of course, with a sanding block, but I don't want to come up here with the sanding block because I'll thin out those spots by the ribs. So I want to be real careful about just radiusing, getting a nice smooth radius right in the front, using a sanding block, obviously. One of the real good uses for this sticky back paper that we buy in rolls, and one of the little sanding shapes that we just happen to have. It looks like this is a real close match to the leading edge design that we want. Now when you use these, here's a good tip. Fold the paper back. You got to watch that you don't put gouges in both sides. You want to always have it that you're only sanding and that you have a little bit of clearance on each side. What'll happen if these edges bite in, if you're using too small of a diameter, you'll get two grooves. So you just want to have that edge right in the middle and have a little bit of clearance this way, and you'll get that nice smooth leading edge. These things are really worth their weight in gold. Now remember what I said is you got to watch you don't get that groove in there. So I try to hold my fingers so I can feel the tip of my finger on each side just a little bit. This will really do a quick job of getting the leading edge, the radius equal on the whole panel. Another way I try to do this, just to keep the dust down. Because my wife has severe asthma, I really have to do, even if she didn't have asthma, it's nice to work in an environment that isn't all full of this balsa dust. This stuff is not good to breathe. A lot of times these are just the little things you can pick up off the video that'll make your modeling at least a lot healthier, if not more fun. But these guys, buying a set of these, just great. And by the way, if you don't have a set of tadpoles, you can buy these that come as an accessory kit for the Porter Cable sander.
See how convenient it is. As we've sanded the radius in here, we can see the toothpicks that we installed coming through, and these are our reference lines. Otherwise we'd never have a real reference for a center line. So here's the deal. I wanted to get one other thing done tonight, and it's coming up on midnight here. So when I get to this point, I want to set the little gear door blocks in, because then I'll be able to take it out of the fixture. And doing a lot of this work, it's a lot easier to do when it's in the fixture than when you take it out. And every minute that it sits in this fixture, the wood, just like sitting in a mold, it kind of conforms to that position. So if there is any stress built in, it's always good that it'll stay there, maybe even overnight, a couple of days, and assume that position, assume the position. Now, believe it or not, when you're working late like this, one of the things I want to make sure is this is the right rib. I've already done this, is cut the hole, and it's not the right rib. Well, I want to make sure I'm cutting in the right section here. Okay, so I can identify that, and I can feel where it's soft, so I can just kind of punch a little hole in here and then start to look for the edges. Now I can really just see this, and I'm going to open this up little by little. Because what I want to do is very carefully put an edge of 64th plywood around this. It accomplishes two things. It stiffens it up considerably.
also makes for that nice neat edge when you have the final finish on the plane. You don't wind up with that edge sinking down. And the trick here is just to open it up little by little. Again, I can see the piece coming now, the back piece. Again, I really want to get a nice fit along here. Now, once I get the roughing out, I want to do the last little dressing of the edge with sandpaper before I set up the little pieces of support. What works extremely well for me is to take one of these Bud McKnight sanding sticks, formerly known as nail files, and just jigsaw one in half. Now what it does, it gives me a nice point to work into the corner. Again, this is just one of those little extra details that, assuming a plane lasts 8, 10, or maybe more years, well, some of the little detail work, like not having the doors get really ratty. Actually, the only part of Strega that has really worn out and is really in need of replacement here is the fuselage. So I'm hoping if we do get to do the carbon fuselage by the end of this season, or even, you never know how my life's going to go, but that would eliminate one of the problems of models, that the life expectancy is dependent on how long it takes the fuselage to self-destruct and the cowling and everything. Never seems like the wing ever wears out. It may be that you'd only need to build one wing in a whole lifetime. I don't know. Tricks that right now is worth $1 million. I take some motorcycle chain oil, put it on the end of a bolt that I keep in a box here. Because what I'm going to be doing is working around these threads with thin CA, and it's amazing how thin CA has a way of working its way down in. You just need one drop of this chain oil, and you wind up getting some CA down in those bolts, and boy, do you have a major repair. So this is one of the tips, especially if it's never happened to you. Even better, make sure it never happens. Now that puts a little coat of grease or oil, or whatever you want to call it, on the thread, so we don't wind up with some nasty glue working its way in there. Okay. I want to make sure I have my hatch, that I have a 64th at least of clearance around the edge, and it looks like I do, so I can take the hatch out and now get some 64th plywood with the larger of the two grains, the front and back grain, going straight up and down. That'll give me a nice razor edge around the whole gear block. And then the last step on this, of course, will be to make a little balsa cover. A great place you can use up your scraps. I want to just strip some of this off. See, I want the major part of the grain going straight up and down if possible. Look at that, almost exactly the right size. Can cut about 10 of these up oversized, because I know I'm going to have to trim them all down. Now what I'll do is just want to line the edge of that box. Now each piece I can just get the length on. Once I get the length on it, and once I have the length, and I can leave the height just a little bit oversized now. Okay, now needless to say, the next step is get out the Dremel tool, grind this down with a sanding drum, and then hand finish this. The idea here is not to make the sheeting any thinner than we need to just get this level. I don't want to make real paper thin sheeting here.
but nothing can compare to the sweetness.
Okay, I also harden up the wood around the edge with some thin CA, just so I'm not going to make this sheeting real thin here. Now that block is confined side to side, front to back, top and bottom, with carbon and 64th plywood, and that's about the lightest way I know of to get some bulletproof landing gear blocks in your wing. Okay, next step is to get out a piece of nice soft wood with the grain going in this direction, because again I want it to match. Just leave it a little bit oversized and try to get these edges real nice. Then when I got it to where I want it, I can put the holes through with a drill press from the back and radius the drill right around this area. I'm going to see if I have some copper tubing. Maybe I don't. These are aluminum bolts. I used to have some tubing that was just a little bit bigger than these heads, so I could make a nice edge on that. I'll see if I have any of that tubing. CA that piece right down, jigsaw this out next, leave it a little oversized because I'd like to get a little bit of a draft angle on there. And the next thing I want to do, I want to drill the holes down through here. Obviously then I need to open them up for the heads of the screws from the top. Okay, that block is in, and now the next thing is I'll get a nice fresh 26 blade or a plane and flatten this down and block sand it until it's almost exactly flat. Now it's a little awkward getting the blade in there, so a good trick, anytime you use a master ass screw plane, hold it on an angle to the cut. Just a little bit of an angle, and the last little bit obviously we'll do with a sanding block. If you were tentative about doing this, you could put some masking tape around the edge. That's a good Bob Hunt trick. I learned from Bob Hunt that you don't have to carve down into the wood, and then you only have to sand away that thickness of the masking tape. Again, a lot of people, the thing they get off of the video that's, I guess, the most important is just what the step-by-step is. And basically, the only way I've learned this is by doing it wrong about 100 times. And then in my mind, I say, don't do that first, don't do that first, do that next. I don't have any tubing exactly the right size. I'm going to have to pick some up next time I go to a hobby shop. Last thing I need to do is put a little notch in here with the Dremel just so the landing gear wire can exit. And that'll be the last step. Well, all that's left is to do the other one off camera and call it quits tonight. I hope I can stay up without having too much coffee. Well, it was worth staying up for tonight.
He's making his bet.
Both of them are in there.
All right, here we go. Whoa! And Lyle Shelton says, you catch this bear if you can.
In today's mail, and I want to leave this information up on the screen for a second, so anybody that really is interested in some really nice scale photos, I'm going to read this little letter that Fred sent. Fred, of course, has contributed many times to our scale research projects. Here are some pictures of Miss Ashley from the Reno pylons. Keep these prints, of course. These are really beautiful pictures. These are professional quality, not just taken with a Kodak or something. Okay, and he goes on and on to say that, I don't need to read the whole letter. Attached is a newspaper article from the Reno newspaper, sad to see. He stood at Pylon 2 for several laps after the crash, didn't take a single photograph after the crash. And I can really relate to that, Fred, believe me. Especially we just had a Egypt Air flight go down in our area. Wow. Anyway, he's also mentioned, after I get the pictures sorted, I'll set up a website for Miss Ashley photos. When I get set up, I'll let you know the address. This way people building the plane can access the site. Sounds like fun. Anyway, Fred, you're really a big contributor to our program, and I really thank you a whole lot here. I'm going to show these pictures. These are world-class pictures. With pictures with this quality, here's some of the things I can really pick up off of a quality photo like this. Look at the scoop up here, up on the nose section, and that's got that unique scoop similar to the bottom. This part back here is really interesting. I wasn't aware how far forward these strakes came. Canopy, obviously this looks like a case for a mold, for a midgely molded canopy here coming up real soon. The Griffin blisters. Again, when you have pictures that are real good quality, one of the things you can do is really zero in on some of the details, like the nose detail. Anyway, and because Fred sent a whole bunch of them, cockpit detail, this will really make a big difference when we can zoom in. See, like seeing the detail around that scoop would be impossible if you didn't have these photos with this quality. It even shows the ink line, the rivet lines, the lettering system. These are going to be, this part back here is really unique. You would never be able to pick that up off the computer. You know, just some of the details you can pick up off here. Again, landing gear details. The lettering, the way that lettering is kind of unique, that it fades in the back. Very unique lettering. I wish we were doing a sliding open cockpit. That's really a cool looking cockpit. Anyway, we'll be able to use these. Actually, a lot of good details on these pictures, and these are beautiful. We're going to hang these all over the shop. Love that nose section. Fred also sent some other Reno Air Race pictures here. These are really great. And he sent a bunch of the newspaper clippings. I'll read these off camera. I don't know how many of these details we can. This is one of the things I don't know if we're going to be able to incorporate it almost scale, half scale, or what, but that really is one of the interesting things of this model, how that back shapes up like that. Anyway, anybody would like to contact Fred, he is a good guy and he has a lot of good information on board. Now today, I guess the next thing we can do, I'm looking at this, we can cut this trailing edge extra piece right off, get this out of the jig. The only problem is, see, I wanted to have a bed pad to cover the table with, a nice new one. Yeah, guess what? I forgot to get it, so I'm going to have to look around for a blanket. But now I can take a nice sharp blade here and take most of this off. I guess leave about 1/8 of an inch or so. And I'll do the final little bit while I still have it in the jig. I'll just make it real easy. But this piece really does hold it in place. Got to go through the glue seam. And then we need to true this trailing edge up. Of course, the trick here is to take just enough off. We leave just enough on there, and we can do the final little bit with a sanding block. And by still having it in the jig instead of having it floating loose in my lap, it'll just make getting this piece a little bit easier. Famous last words. Anyway, hey, thanks to Fred for those photos. Wow, unbelievable. We're really starting to accumulate a nice little batch of material here. And having those photos, it gives us the choice of putting on a lot of details, and if we don't want to put the details on, at least knowing what they really would be if we were to make a super semi-scale job like the Seafire, where it has a lot of bells and whistles. The way that I make this a little bit easier, not a whole lot, that's for sure. Trying to hold my finger so my the initial finger here just acts as a little guide.
so I can get the last little bit off. And as I'm going along, as soon as I shut the camera off, I'll get the vacuum going at the same time, vacuum up all these little chips too. And try to get a nice blend in there. And then get the last little bit with a sanding block. Now I'm keeping real close track of the center line that I don't make a divot or a hollow or something here. Now as I get the final little bit of sanding done, what I want to do is, this is pinstriping tape that's clear in the center, and I know this is exactly 1/8 of an inch, so I can run this right along the edge. I can see the center line through the tape. It sticks real well, and it gives me a nice edge to work toward to get out all these high and low spots from the carving. The tape is really a big help, and we'll final sand that in before we take it out of the jig. Trailing edge is all sanded. I want to just spin these dowels just a little bit. Make sure there's no glue along the edge here, and it looks like this one might be free. Otherwise you don't want to break it away. You want to get in there with a razor and cut it free. And we can pull the rod. And we'll take a look at what we have here. Well, we're finished with the jig, and from this point on, what I wanted to get is a bed pad, but in the meantime, until I get one, I'm going to have to use an old blanket. The jig, the rods, all of the templates, I'll put together for the next person that's going to use this. Things, and I've said it before, because Karen has this extreme case of asthma, we never do anything in the house we can do outside. Now this is the fine sanding. Remember, I don't want to use a block on this or I'm going to cut into it. And I don't want to do all the final sanding. I take a little piece of this sticky back paper, either 400 or 320, whatever. And I just want to put, let me see if I can get this up on the camera. Even using a vacuum cleaner, this dust is just hard to deal with. It gets on everything down in the shop. I had to patch that little spot where I pushed the landing gear wire through already. But what it is, now it's a wing. Now I feel like, and I'll basically sit out here for a couple hours and detail sand this wing out. But because the breeze is blowing, oh that's nice. Because the breeze is blowing, it gives me a lot of choices here. I don't have to listen to the vacuum cleaner for the next 4 hours. And right at this point, I like to get as much of this kind of sanding, as long as I can get it done outside. Getting it done outside is so much better than doing it inside. Another thing I want to is get over this. Even though I've done these with a block, just touch each one. I haven't radiused off the cap strips yet. Because what I want to do is either this afternoon or tomorrow, just rough out the wingtips. I don't have a final shape in my mind, but having this in one piece now, I can start to lay out the wingtips. Now I'll do the final sanding on this. Just using a bunch of blankets, I duct tape them to the table, but I want to get that egg crate pad next time I go shopping. The next step on this is going to be to lay out roughly, since we don't know the really final shape, I want to rough out the blocks, get them tacked together and get an idea if that's the shape that I'm looking for. And the best way, if you don't have a final shape in your mind, is just make the blocks oversized and keep working on them until you're happy with the look. And this is the hard part, is just the look. Again, these wingtips look like a little bit of a cross between Ted Fancher's wingtips and I don't know what, but I'll lay them out a little oversized, lay the blocks out, give a little bit of a sweep in them. I originally laid this out when I laid out the rib spacing and the span and the square inch areas, so it would have 2-inch tip blocks. But since I'm going to be cutting some off the front to try to make it scale, it may be that I can get 2 1/4 inches or something without a problem. But I'm going to lay that out on some colored paper first, the way I always lay out rudder parts or parts that need interpolation. Anyway, this gets kind of difficult because the thing I'm trying to do is make it as scale as possible, but I don't want to make it look like an exact copy of Ted Fancher's plane either. You know, it looks like we're going to make these squarer than I originally thought. And I'm going to leave even a sharper corner up here and then blend it until I see, because this is a critical thing to get this blend real nice around here. I don't like it when it comes to a point. But I'll work on getting that radius. I'll just make the blocks oversized to begin with. 2-inch blocks. Always start. I keep going back and forth trying to make this curve more, and then it doesn't look scale either. It looks more like a flight streak. I don't know. I don't like that look either. So I'm going to basically steal some of this squared off corner that I had on the original Strega. Leave the block full size until I'm done cutting and carving, and then I'll have a pattern for what the rough first shape was. The choices of blocks, I got the best one. I marked it the best. This was already has a bite taken out of it from the Spitfire, but what I want to do is I want to make up the blocks that I need, and obviously I want to use the 2 lightest ones, so I'll try to use up the lightest block first. Use up the lightest one on the inner tip, and I don't care about the outer tip. The outer tip can be the heaviest block I have in the shop. It won't matter. So we'll rough out one of these, even though I know these will need to be fine-tuned in the carving process. Now I want to start with all the blocks having a good square 90-degree edge on them, because the way I usually make the tips, it requires that I be able to separate the blocks like clamshells. The main thing is that I don't get a joint on these that's not 90 degrees. And it really doesn't matter what shape tip you have if you're going to use this method. You pretty much have to start with everything being 90 degrees, or else you wind up with clamshells that don't hold the clam. Now the only block that was a little lighter, this one was 1 grain lighter. Almost doesn't pay, but any little bit I can save here is going to be a big help. Now I want to take the 2 that are going to comprise the outer tip. This looks like the grain isn't as good in the other one. I'll keep these for the inner one. These will be the outer ones, and I want to tack glue them together. Just a couple of drops of CA. I want to see if I have enough thickness out at the tip. I think I'm short by about 1/16 of an inch. While they're joined together, I wanted to make, again, I was worried because I had this figured out in my brainless way here that the tip would be exactly 2 inches tip to tip, edge to edge, and it is, so I'm very lucky. Now, what I want to do is I just want to clean this edge up because I'm going to do a rough carving, and just trace this edge on here because I can saw that off without a lot of problem. Now I have this pinned in so the centers are on, and a piece of tape to hold it here, and I want to leave just about the thickness of a pen line, oversize. And what this allows me to do is get a lot of the material off with the saw before I even put the curve in the wing. If you didn't use this method, what you would have to wind up doing is all this carving, and usually you don't get it nice and straight anyway. So again, this is where we need these 90-degree, I need this to be 90 degrees to this when I run this through the saw, and I can take most of that material out. It just saves me a lot of carving to do it that way, no matter what shape the wingtip is, even if it's a nobler wingtip. I'm making sure I leave the line and about 1/64 of an inch of material on, just so I have a last little bit I can blend this right into the cap strip areas, the edge of the ribs. Just leaving on just that little bit. Okay, next step is going to be to tack glue this on, making sure I have this center line and this center line right on, and I don't have any gap here where the rib is down or high. The choices before I tack glue this on, I obviously can take the corners and a lot of this material away. It just makes it easier later on that I don't have, when I'm carving this and it's attached to the wing, it gets a little awkward. This will save me a little bit of time just roughing this out. Again, I always like to get as much of the material off as possible before I even tack glue it on. It just makes it easier, I guess. Anyway, every time you get some of this off, you can envision. Now I want to change the shape as I go along. I have a little bit of a rake in it. I want to change that leading edge, but I always have to start with a rough block, because when you draw this up in plans in 2 dimensions, it isn't exactly the same as drawing it up when it's on the model. It just looks different. And I'm trying to get that, a little bit of that flavor, a little look of the model. It's a difficult thing to do without compromising the design to where it's, in some way, it's handicapped come flying time. And I think we've done that, especially Joe Adamusco's done that well with designing up the Spitfire, that there was really no compromise that made it anything other than a real competitive plane at the very end. So anytime I can get some of this material off, it just makes it easier further down the road. Okay, that's probably all we're going to get done tonight. In fact, maybe what I'll do, I'll just tack this on. Yeah, I think I'll tack that on and that'll be it for tonight. Now the final thing is I put the tape. In fact, in this case I put 2 layers of tape here. I'll do the rest of the carving right up to the tape with a brand new blade, and then get a little sanding block and try to block sand that in. But the idea is then you always have the thickness of the tape as a little overage, so when you put the tip on permanently after the box is in or the lead out guide, and once you do the final blending, you take the tape off and all you have to do is sand the thickness of a piece of masking tape. Now I put a little bit of an angle in, a little bit of an angle out, but again, I'm going to adjust this as I go along, because it's not just the top view that you see. You do see this whole, it's hard to describe, this whole curve here, and if it isn't right, it really does look, I don't know, a couple of times I've done it and I've not been happy with it. Now I always want to, at this point, I always try to get that last little bit off, but it really isn't productive. I like to leave a little on there, because as I hollow it out, then I can come and take a little more off of this side. In fact, as soon as I go into the tape, that's a good time to stop. Just run your finger along there. As soon as you feel the tape, you know that's about all you're going to realistically get off of there. I want to be real careful and split this with the thinnest razor blade I have, because it's just tacked on. Oops. I got the piece off. Now obviously this is going to be the outer tip with the tip weight box. So the first thing I want to do is, this is just for my own reference, I want to leave plenty of material. I don't think there's many things funnier than having a super lightweight tip box, or a pen that doesn't write. Here we go. I want to make sure I leave at least, well, that much material anyway, when I figure out exactly how I want to lay out the box. And here I'm trying to carefully split this, and I split it alright. It just popped apart. I really didn't have a lot of glue on there. And clean this edge up. Now I can lay out where I want to have, this is going to be the top piece. I want to lay out in the bottom piece where I want the tip weight box to be. I want to start with all square surfaces as possible. Transpose that line out on a whole piece, because I don't want to get this weakened up, and I want to leave enough material in the back for a hinge. Now I can lay out where the box actually will be. Now what I want to do is transpose that up onto the top just by carrying the lines up this way. Okay, now you can see this is where I want the box to be, so I continue those lines up, trace this line. Now I can go and, using this side for my 90 degree, run in here with a fine jigsaw blade and cut out that box. Good thing to avoid is getting it up into the highly curved or highly curved areas. Keep it as flat as possible. And see, if you're real careful, you can enter with the saw in one spot, go around and come right back out, so you only have to deal with one seam. And after I dress the edges off, this will be a pretty good fit. Now once I get those edges sanded, I like to harden everything up on the inside of the box. This really takes a beating from changing the tip weights and putting the little hatch back on over and over. This gives me a nice hard edge to work off. Step is I want to know exactly where this transposes in here, so I can trace that. And of course now I don't need that piece in. If you follow the sequence, you get even one step out of sequence and it's a problem. This has all been carefully thought out by a real aeronautical genius, me. I don't think so. Anyway, now what we're going to do is put a little piece of plywood in here, and I'll get it about 1/3 from the back so we have room. I want the weight, one of my things is I want the weight as far forward as possible. So I can mark this out where this will be. Maybe we give that a little bit more. Now you can see by having these pieces that match and they're on a 90-degree angle, I can lay out the little piece of plywood that's going to be the mount for my blind nut, and a little piece of plywood, and they're going to be in real good alignment when I put it back together. Now I have to get the exact same mirror image piece here. Now I need to just get in there and Dremel out the room where the weights will reside. I know I have my little piece that'll be perfectly flush here. Just get in there with any kind of a cutter and Dremel out a little hole for a couple ounces of lead. Now the object here is that this piece, I need to just put a little piece of plywood in here with a blind nut with a bolt. That's going to hold the weights nice and tight with a lock nut. If you've ever had a weight come loose and start vibrating in the wingtip, it usually destroys a wingtip, or even worse, the wing. Having it bolted down with a bolt is really a good investment. What I need to do is just press this down, get an impression of where that bolt is. Now I can Dremel it out a little bit. Now here's what makes this work so well. Here's our little mount. This is going to set this. Our little door is going to be set in place. We're going to mark where we want to put the hold down bolt here pretty soon. Let's do it reverse. Make it easy. See the little ledge? That's what holds it nice and square and straight. But now what I want to do is I want to mark where I want to have the bolt go, but I don't want to have this glued in place. So what's going to happen is, and this is the whole key to the whole thing, you can see where that resides. First thing I do is drill this. This is on a 90-degree plane with the drill press, so that gives me a straight 90 degree. Then I use this to mark where the blind nut is going to be. And see, I have that outline on there. And when that's all done, then I can take this off, lay this piece on here,
Do a little test fit, make sure that all fits, and if it does, then I can glue the blind nut and glue that piece in, and that tip will be. And the most important part of this is to get this piece in while this is laying in a drill press and 90 degrees. That sets everything in position. The whole deal is make sure everything is 90 degrees. I say that over and over again because that's what makes this system so nice and easy and, well, totally foolproof. Just for these purposes, take the 180 drill. That'll set the head of the screw so everything is staying nice and straight when I set that in. Even though I want to put a little reinforcement around that. But you want to use this box to set that hole. Otherwise this whole thing is, it's hard to figure out the last piece of the puzzle if you don't have it that way. Now a good tool to do this with is just a sharpened piece of music wire. Now see, this piece actually is bolted in place, and I'm just going to put some slow drying CA on there. Make sure that lines up before it kicks off. And when I take the bolt out, that piece will already be in perfect position and perfect alignment. Now once that glue actually dries, make sure I have a good alignment. And if you've put the mandatory drop of chain lube or oil on the bolt, you'll have what amounts to be a perfect fit. Now I just want to make sure I got the alignment good. And it's always good before you put a permanent glue joint, just tack it once and then screw the box on and off and make sure you have a good alignment. But that box, it sits on a nice little shelf around the edge. Your weights bolt in. Once the tack glue is dry. Now I always like to tack glue it because I'm real careful about getting the fit real nice here. At least I try anyway. Once you're happy with that fit, obviously then you can get a glue seam around the whole perimeter here. But I think that's just the best way that I know of to do a tip weight box. And all the ones I've done this way have really withstood the test of time. And nothing is dumber in the whole world than making a lightweight tip box or a tip weight box that's too small, and I've done them both. There's one final thing. I just like to Dremel out a little bit of the extra material here. It's just going along for the ride, and what it allows me to do is get the lead weights further forward in a tip weight box, and I always feel that then I have a lot more flexibility. I would much rather have, if we had all choices, I'd like to have the weight up here, but then I have a very awkward looking box. So I'll just take, and I won't be too careful about it, just take a chunk of that out, and that'll be the end of that tip. Last thing, I have a little piece of this aluminum tubing that I use to cut. Just press the tubing in, and I want to put some CA on that. Sand that down flat, and that'll be a little protection from the Allen wrench chewing up that screw hole in time. Nice little detail touch. Okay, the only thing left is to tack glue this back on, and it'll be ready for the final sand out. And that's a real nice way. I like that. We've got a little bit of rake out, a radius. I'm kind of happy with this, so I'll make up a permanent pattern. And I hope, a real reliable tip weight box system. Okay, one of the little tricks I found in attaching this back, and because we're really accurate now, most of this is really quite close, even more important on the inner tip. One of the things that I find is real helpful is just tape the wingtip in place. Then what I like to do is, see how the back is a little bit apart, I like to just push it together, make sure it's on center, push the front together, make sure it's on center, and then tack it in a few places, because if you go the cap strip is only a 1/16 and this is probably an 1/8, and you want to really make sure you get a perfect alignment there. And then we'll blend that. Another thing I've done from time to time is I've tried gluing that seam without having the box in place, and a little bit of that glue would work its way under there and glue the hatch in place. Always take the hatch out before you glue the final seam, and then that'll be ready to sand. Now I just been trying to get these blends in. And this is one of the things that just takes time. Get that last little bit of material out of there. But it's really starting to feel and look like an aeroplane now. Again, I always do most of what I do with my hand to feel for little imperfections. Now the last step of this is I always want to put these little corners in, but I want to make sure the grain is going on this angle. If you put the grain this way or this way, you're always going to wind up with one edge not the way you want it. So I carefully cut the corners out, make them oversized, make them square, and then using a dowel, put the radius in, and that's the easiest way to get those corners in. And the most important thing is to get the grain going corner to corner. Once that's in, you can take the dowel, in this case, any diameter dowel that you like. And we can eventually get whatever radius we want. And obviously I'd like to get all four of the radiuses and all four of the corners the same. This also strengthens it up a little bit where that tip weight box is. You always want to put the pieces in square because you can never get these edges and angles right. Now unfortunately we're coming up on the end of this tape, and I didn't want to start the other wingtip and not be able to finish it. I want to kind of keep some symmetry to that, so I'm going to finish these corners. And the last thing, true everything up with a real fine grit paper. This is real important too, is to make sure that's perfectly parallel. Now on the next tape we'll get that inner wingtip done. Again, I don't want to stop in the middle of the tape. Anyway, it's really starting to look like a wing. This is the point at which it starts to really get to be fun. And again, we're at the end of the tape. Thanks for joining us. Thanks to all the people, including Fred Cronwell, sending in all those things regarding Miss Ashley, and of course all the Reno racers. I love the way those little radiuses look in the corner. Now I don't know how much straighter than that you can even make a wing. This is probably going to be the best wing I've ever made. The jig worked perfectly. Now once we get that inner tip done, then it's really starting to be a wing. Yeah, I'm kind of happy the way the tips came out. And I hope some of this information you can put to use in your own modeling program, obviously.
got to admit, we've had a good life. And a lot of fun along the way. Please share the tapes. Please make sure you share the information so this hobby can continue to grow. In California, I want to go through these one by one. This is from the Bob Palmer Classic meet. First off, it starts off with a couple of pictures of a wing. This is from Jack Young, wing he's making from Strega plans. And so far, enough of these Stregas have been made that Kent Tyser's for one, I think, is the nicest one. Mine seems to be, well, usable aeroplane anyway, that's for sure. Anyway, and this was, Jack is rapidly learning the tricks of making a competitive aeroplane. Keep it simple, keep it basic, keep it light. Don't build any big twists into it. I guess that's always been the generic way of doing it. And that's, by the way, that's a pretty nice copy of it. He's also sent some pictures here from the, again, this is from the Bob Palmer Classic. And I want to go through these one by one. Didn't put many. Now, I don't know who some of these people are, but this looks like Bob Whiteley's plane. Not sure now. I'm not really sure whose planes they are. He's got a caption here, Friday morning hook. See, I can't read this. Friday morning hooking club, Bart Klipinski, Gordon Delaney, Bob Whittle, Jack Young. Anyway, Jack, I'll type it next time. It really isn't his fault. It's that I can't read it. Anyway, a couple other pictures. Part of the intermediate lineup. And we always appreciate seeing things from outside our area. It looks like another picture of Bob Whiteley's plane. Or it's a copy of it, and that is definitely Bob's Mini Mako. A nice Intrepid. It looks like he's got a fingerprint on the picture. But anyway, we really do appreciate it. From Jack Young. Today's mail I also have, and this is a great set of pictures. This is from Milton Graham Jr., and he has from time to time been sending me pictures. This is Norm Whittle's Sultan. Now this year he put, and I've asked him to graciously put on longer captions, because those of us here in the East, and we don't really know everybody by a first name basis. This is Norm Whittle's Sultan, 61 ounce PA 40 by Randy Smith, K&B Super Epoxy, line length 70 feet. Norm placed second at the 68 Nats, fourth at the 78 Nats. He was winning and left out the triangles. Glad I never do that. Anyway, these are some really nice pictures. So I'm going to read the caption of the one before it. Another shot of Tim Meek's profile Pathfinder. Tim sold this plane at the contest. Hey, that's a nice looking plane. Anyway, from Milton Graham. Profile Pathfinder, 9 weeks building time. OS Tower 40 reworked by Tom Muggleton. Brand new aircraft paint. Oh, certified brand. Look at this. You think I could read? Certified brand aircraft paint. 62-foot lines. I saw this plane crash, and it is in the repaired state. Anyway, we got a lineup of Jerry Silva, John Wright, Gordon Delaney, Carl Shoup, obscured, Bart Kaplinsley, Bill Biles, Norm Whittle, Tony Naccarato, Eric Rule. Lee Strickland, Tony Naccarato, Eric Rule, Dennis Choate. We met Dennis at this year's Nats. Pursuing the goods at the contest. And something we all enjoy doing, coming over and getting some goodies. Anyway, John Miller, Twin Flight Streak, Mark Fencher design, classic legal, 3 weeks building time, 48 ounce, 74 inch span, pair of OS 20s, stock monocoat, Pactra urethane. That's a beauty. I didn't know these were classic legal. It really shows you what I know. I'm really not. Gordon Delaney, one of my favorite people.
Intrepid modified from a Randy Smith kit, 5 months building time, 74 ounces. Gordon. Ether pipe and prop, acrylic lacquer and monocoat. Sat around for 5 months, was 78 ounces, but Gordon managed to remove 4 ounces. Heavy planes can win stunt contests. Lost first place expert by half a point. My apologies. As I said before, heavy planes are okay, Gordon. Hey, and I hope you like those videos, Gordon. Anyway, next one. Ray Firkins fueling up his classic Skylark. Beautiful paint job. By the way, I really appreciate the captions. And I hope I'm going to send these back to Milt and encourage him to send these on to Tom Morris. I don't know if he wants me to send them on straight or not. Carl Shoup, Eagle 780, 55 ounce, 2 weeks building time. OS 46 SF AAC reworked by Carl, all monocoat, 69 feet, 6 first place wins, homemade muffler. This is the plane I'm most concerned about. Hey, that's a beauty. Nothing wrong with that. Gordon Delaney European VUM Classic, a nice flyer. I think we've seen that on video before. Looks like he has one of the Tom Lay mufflers. Jerry Silver's 1955 Atom won Pilot's Choice Award again at this contest. Jerry would go on to win Pilot's Choice Award at VSC. And you can see why. That is a beauty. That's a very classic, the Billy Werwidge look or the Steve Woolley look, whoever gets credit for that. Two-time Nats champ Bob Palmer handing the second place trophy and expert to Gordon Delaney. John Wright's ever-present sales booth. John is an expert at purchasing used engines. He gave a talk at the club's meeting on the subject. Obviously, if somebody's looking to buy a used motor or just check out John's prices, it's a good way to do it. Bill Biles, Heartbeat Models, Impact. And that I've seen fly. That's an excellent flying plane. The results, we really can't see them. I can't even read them in there, but I appreciate the photo. Bob Whiteley's Miss Kell, 99. Kurt Mullenix, PA 51. First place in expert by half a point. I have the wing to this plane. Nice looking ship. I think this is the one. Yes, it is the one he had at the Nats. Ron Cook. Ron used to live with us. He's near in Pennsylvania. Trivial Pursuit number 4. 5 months building time. 60 ounces. PA 40. All Sig Dope. All Randy Smith 70-foot lines. Brand new ship. First contest. And as all of Ron's things, absolutely flawless finish. Here's another beautiful picture. Looks just as nice. Like Ted could just go and switch the AMA numbers, or Ted or David or whoever. The hell with him, I'll do it. Another shot of Ron Cook's, and this is a beautiful plane. By the way, Ron, when he lived up here, always had beautiful stuff. Awesome stuff. Billy Werwidge's Aries Classic, 200 hours building time, 38 ounces. K&B Super Epoxy, 15 appearance points. Second place, Bob Palmer Intermediate. This plane stayed at my house before it was finished, and I promptly broke the wing. I guess I'm just used to foam wings. Anyway, from my good friend Milton Graham, a little funny story. I lost one of Milton's pictures here in the shop. It was a black and white picture, and I lost it due to my everything flying all over the place here, carbon fiber everywhere. And luckily, we recovered the picture, and he's got it, I hope by now, got it back. But Milt, I really appreciate it. These were great. I always appreciate the pictures. I didn't even notice there's 2 sets of photos in here. I'm glad I'm paying attention. John Wright's Shark. Dennis Choate's Cabaret, original design by him, double star 60 stock, foam wing with Imron paint. First place in advanced at the 1999 Knights Joust. Dennis moved from advanced to expert at the Knights Joust. Yeah, we got to see that at the, is that the ship? Yeah, I think that's the one he had at the Nats. Dennis Choate. He does carbon fiber sailboats. Ah, the Leicester. Tom Lay, engine man extraordinaire, Super Tiger engine specialist. Tom has modified 800 motors to date. His engines have won Nats in 9 different countries. Started engine rework in 1971. Tom is also a street rod specialist. Tom is also a guy who knows how to have fun, but we'd love to dump some water on him at the Nats. Tom, if you ever come to the Nats, trust me, Tom. Trust me, you're a victim. Anyway, here's a picture of Tom Lay's 1937 Ford delivery sedan, 150 miles an hour top speed. So, you know, I like that for carrying your plane. Tom Lay, by the way, anybody doesn't know, these might be the nuts I anodized for him years ago. He is one of the cool guys who knows, check it out, knows how to have fun. If he was around when Brian was getting duct taped, he would have added about 10 rolls of tape, and anybody would have dragged them behind a car. Anyway, Bill Hayworth's Rayette, a classic 67 profile, ST46, reworked by Tom Lay. John Morton's modified Sig Twister, all Sig dope, Carl Goldberg Ultra Coat on wings. John learned the pattern on this plane. Rear moment is 2 inch longer than stock, and it has a Ray rudder. Always a good choice. Bill Biles Impact, built from a Heartbeat Models kit, built completely stock from kit, PA40, Randy Smith motor, Randolph Aircraft dope, Sig Light Coat Clear Coat, weighs 60 ounces, 10th place at the 88 Nats, 3 first place wins. And that is a pretty plane. I like the lettering. Nice gold lettering. This is Ricky Pyatt on the right and Sylvia Strickland on the left doing the tabulating chores. Ricky never fails to bring the best food to the contest. In particular, her potato salad has got me hooked. Hey Ricky, I got to tell you, when we were at the Nats the last year, you came up, we talked for a while. I knew you made good potato salad. Hey, see, you could have got a few free videos out of me. Anyway, this is the awards table with trophies and concourse. Concourse, hey, I like it. Hey. Ray Firkin Skylark. This is the smaller 1962 version, OS Max 40 FP by Lou Woolard. Lou, by the way, was one of the ones almost drowned at the Nats from buckets away. Actually, we're sorry we did do it because we almost got his hearing aids wet. It would have cost us $2,200 if we didn't have the good taste not to get his hearing aids wet. Anyway, won the concourse at the 1998 Nats Joust. And that's a beauty. Boy, that's a good copy of the paint job of the original, too. Tom Muggleson and family, machinist and engine man, owner of Tom's Machine Service, OS 40 Max FP specialist, developer of the Happy Camper FP40, also Blue Magic